Valuable was only for the girl who said tomorrow could die, I could die.
Now my room has got to weather, but the sunshine never comes through. Because I always dark and dreary since I broke off baby with you.
So I'm Cheryl Pawlewski. I'm the co-producer with Sharyn and Will of this 6-disc box set of Pomus demos that came out last month. And it's called You Can't Hit a Square, because we need a title like that. So we have Sharyn Felder and Will Bratton, daughter and son-in-law to Doc, and together they've been tremendous stewards of Doc's legacy by maintaining his publishing, overseeing both tribute album released by Rhino Records in 1995 called Till the Night Is Gone, and producing the film, aka Doc Pomus, which I hope you all just leave here and go stream it. Forget about the rest of the Americana stuff. Toni Wine is sitting right next to me. She was signed at 14 years old as a songwriter, later studied at Juilliard. We could spend hours on Toni's career. She should really have a book and her own movie and talk show. But as a songwriter, you'll know her by Groovy Kind of Love by the Mindbenders, Candida by Toni, Orlando, and Dawn, Black Pearl by Checkmates Limited, and a couple zillion others. As a singer, you'll know her work as part of 2 fictitious bands. One, Toni, Orlando, and Dawn, And of course, the Archies, where Toni was both Betty and Veronica. That's hard to do. Also her own singles on Coal Pigs, Atco, Warner Brothers Monument, and singing on everything from the Meow Mix commercial to being a Babylon sister on Steely Dan's Babylon Sisters. Anyway, it's so wonderful to have an artist and songwriter that collaborated with Doc here on our panel. Michael Graves in the middle. He's a 5-time Grammy Award-winning restoration and mastering engineer and my partner in most music crime. I happen to think he's one of the best restoration mastering engineers on the planet, and others, they seem to agree. And there's 3 other folks here that were players in this box set endeavor. Joy Graves, Mike's wife, who works with him at Osiris Studio. Jordan McLeod, who's floating around. There he is, back in the corner. He did an awful lot of restoration on this. He works with Mike and Joy at Osiris. And my lovely wife, Dr. Audrey Bilger, president of Reed College in Portland. So, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. I want to ask Cheryl.
Peter Grelnick is here, who added notes to our box.
Oh, yes. Right here in the front.
My dad started, it was so unlikely for him to be a blues singer. He was a Jewish kid, growing up in Brooklyn with polio, and he, at about 17 or 18, stumbled into a club, and his idol was Big Joe Turner, and he managed to get himself up on the stage and sang with Frankie Newton, and the next thing you know, he was asked to come back. And he had only known one song, and so he had to write a few more songs to come back. Piney Ground Blues was the one he knew, because Joe Turner was his complete idol. So the thing was, he wrote a few for himself to sing. And somehow that led to him cutting sides, and they were just showing a couple of images on Apollo, and hold on, what is it? Chess. He was, yeah, he said he was the actual earliest artist on Chess, or one of the earliest, and for a white guy, Jewish, on crutches with black bands, pretty wild. And his band consisted at times of King Curtis,
Mickey Baker,
King Curtis, pretty amazing. So
Mickey Baker was...
yeah, Mickey Guitar Baker, you know, then he became Mickey and
There you
Sylvia,
go.
Love is Strange, etc. Pretty wild. So, and then Mickey, you know, played on most of his demos. So that was his singing career, which was about 10 years. But he met my mom. Am I pivoting? I'm trying to do the quick cliff notes. He just do that straight.
We can meander around too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he was this singer hanging out at the Jefferson Hotel, where the early Atlantic Records was, and he would pitch songs to Ahmet, and even Big Joe Turner would be there, and Joe met him and said, "Can you write stuff for me?" And then my dad wrote for like Ruth Brown and Laverne Baker and all the early great Atlantic artists. And the next thing you know, he's living in a hotel. He loved hotel life. He was a hotelier. I mean, he was a lobbyist. Let's put it that way. He hung in the lobby. That was his life. Lobby was his life. It remained his life to the end of his life. So my mom came into the hotel. This was the New York Central Hotel, which has since crumbled. And my mother met him and he fell in love. I'm jumping ahead, but he realized if he's gonna become somebody that could make a living, he has to write a bunch of songs. He can't just be a blues singer, living in and out of Fleabag hotels with one suit. He has to write for other people. So that's sort of, marrying my mother and meeting my mother made him realize he can't just be a singer. So this kid, Jerome Solon Felder, a crippled Jewish kid from Brooklyn, sort of created himself as a blues singer and then pivoting into being a songwriter. It's really a very unlikely story on all levels.
And you said early on, Youngblood and Lonely Avenue gave him a lot of confidence, getting early cuts like that, yeah?
Lonely Avenue, he wrote by himself, and Lonely Avenue was like 1955, 6, and he was, just writing alone. But he wrote with Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, and they wrote Youngblood together, and he learned about that on his honeymoon, that was covered. He didn't even know that. But all this happened from hanging out at the Jefferson Hotel. The Jefferson Hotel was where Atlantic Records early on was. And it was a very different world. It was like Herb Abramson and Jerry Wexler later, but Ahmet and Nesui and all those guys. But my dad just hung out there pitching songs.
And so pretty early on, it seems, he got fixed up with Mort Schumann, yeah?
Well, Morty was, we called him Morty, Mordecai, Mortimer. Mort was my dad's cousin's friend. So they were Mort was like how many years younger?
13 years.
13 years younger than my father. So his cousin Nisha said, I think you might want to meet my friend Morty. So my dad, listened to Mort play the piano and thought he had something, and he said, I'll train you to be a songwriter. If you kind of sit in on the room and you listen, and so he kind of gave him a piece of the action for a couple of years. And that's how kind of Mort pivoted into becoming a songwriter. But Doc was, father to him in a certain sense, and gave him a piece of everything in the beginning, but Mort didn't know anything about songwriting. He was just had a great ear.
So does Doc and Mort get a publishing
By the
deal?
way, this is Mort and Doc.
Yeah,
There you go.
that's when they were already in the drill building.
Yeah.
So my dad's really good friend was Otis Blackwell. I'm sure you guys all know who Odie was.
What the tune?
No, he wrote a few songs. I would say Fever, Don't Be Cruel, Return to Sender, etc. And so, Otis was from Brooklyn, like my dad. Otis was, I believe, a pants presser initially, Odie. But they hung out together. So Otis was always with my dad, and Odie introduced him to a guy by the name of Paul Case, who was the professional manager at Hill and Range. Hill and Range was the publishing company. Hill and Range handled Elvis and early country artists, and a lot of amazing people, but Elvis predominantly. And so that's how he got into it, through Otis Blackwell introducing him.
It just so happens that Hill and Range was one of the publishers pitching songs to Elvis, right?
Right.
Lucky.
Not too shabby.
So I think, was it Mess of Blues? Was that the first cut?
Yeah, they were in London. So my dad and Mort had had a fair amount of success by this time. They'd had Teenager in Love. The British recording industry invited them to come to England because Teenager in Love was a big hit in America. And so then they go to London, and it's recorded by Craig Douglas, who was a British star, and a whole bunch of, there was about 4 artists.
There was 3 versions on the charts, like on the top 10.
Yeah, which is kind of unusual to have the same song, top 10, by different artists. So they went to London, and they were guests of the British recording industry, and what is the guy's name who was in London? Who was? Lamar Fike, thank you. So Lamar Fike said to my dad, Elvis was coming out of the army, and did he have any material for him? Something like that. And my dad, they cut a quick demo in London of Mess of Blues. So that was the first record Elvis made, I believe, when he came out of the army.
And so that became the B-side of It's Now or Never, which was a huge hit, and probably a pretty good payday.
So that's Jack Good on the far end, and he was a dear friend of ours. He would stay with us. He created, I believe, Hullabaloo and Shindig, and he would live with us whenever he came to New York, and that was a little guy called Little Toni, and there's Morty, and we all lived in England for about at least 6 months.
Awesome.
During that time.
So we have the demo of Mess of Blues to play. Fancy that.
What do you
And,
know?
and Mike worked his magic, and it morphs into the Elvis version, so you can hear how closely the two. I'll just shut up.
Just got your letter, baby. Too bad you can't come home. Well, I swear I'm going crazy, sitting here all alone. Since you're gone, I got a mess of love. I ain't slept a wink since Sunday. I can't eat a thing all day. Every day is just Blue Monday. Since you've been away, since you're gone, I got a mess of blue. Oops, there goes a teardrop rolling down my face. Well, if you cry when you're in love, you sure ain't no disgrace. I gotta get myself together. I'm gonna catch the next train going and leave her blue behind. Since you're gone, I got a mess of blue. Oops, there goes a teardrop rolling down my face. If you cry when you're alone, sure ain't no disgrace. I gotta get myself together before I lose my mind. I'm gonna catch the next train going and leave her blue behind. Since you're gone, a mess of since you're gone, I got a mess since you're gone,
A lot of others. There's Toni Wine. But there's just, there's a lot of them are on here, but there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more songs. And even late in the game, after we had gone to New York, I'll show you something about that, and later, and transferred a lot of these acetates, more kept coming up. Somebody was visiting Mike in the studio, and he's like, "Oh, I know that label, that associated label. I think I have some acetates." And so we're like, "Bring them over." But anyway, so back to co-write. Since we have you here, Toni, I want to know a whole lot of things. One, how did you come to work with Doc? And what was your collaboration like?
I first met Doc, actually. I had been signed to a publishing company, Alden Music. It was Alan Evans and Donnie Kirshner. And I was close to 15 at the time. And Doc and Morty were up at the office. I happened to meet them that day. Donnie wanted us to write together, Donnie Kirshner, but I was very young. I was still in school. I was at Music and Art High School in New York. And of course my mom, she said, maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday, which of course was crazy. But about a year later, I was allowed to take the bus down from high school to the office. And I was introduced once again to Doc and Morty. Donnie wanted me to write with Doc. Morty, as you said, he was already doing other things, and I really liked Morty, but I loved Doc.
He loved you.
He was very special. And we immediately hit it off. And we started to write a little bit in the offices. That was a difficult situation. So Doc says, you need to come to the hotel. You know? That's all I need to tell my mom, listen, I'm going to the hotel. But anyway, I did go, and we hit it off immediately. We just started writing. And it was a great thing.
He was primarily a lyricist.
Oh, yeah.
And
He had a piano. Yeah, I think it was 2 rooms that he had. And there was a piano in there.
and you wrote with a ton of other people too throughout your career.
I did.
How many tunes did you collaborate with Doc on?
I think we had 4 or 5, but we only demoed 2 because those were the 2 that we really liked.
All right. I think we should hear one of those.
And I must say that on the one song that you had up there, Your Conception of Love.
Yeah, we're gonna play that.
Oh, okay. Well, that song was pretty wild because later on down the line, I married a guy named Chips Moman. But I did not realize till I think right before I married him, he recorded a girl named Sandy Posey, who was born a woman. Martha Sharp wrote Born a Woman. And he recorded that song of Your Conception of Love that Doc and I wrote. I didn't even know it. I didn't know.
It's hard to tell them apart. I mean, we won't play the Sandy Posey group. They're really close.
Well, I did all the background voices on it.
Oh, well, that explains it.
And I played keyboards on it.
Well, here's the demo, and then when we come back from it, I'd like to know, it's such a beautiful, breezy tune, but if you listen to the lyrics,
Whew. I have to tell you that we came up with that title making fun of other writers that we knew were on their 4th or 5th marriages.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay. I swear to God, we just said, God, what is their conception of love?
oh my God, okay, so hit pause. Now let's listen with that context.
What is another way?
And so you go on living.
with Donnie, and like a month later signed with BMI. And that's how it, yeah.
Wow, incredible. It's a beautiful song.
Thank you.
So before we move into talking a little bit more about this particular project, we can tease that we sort of, we stopped somewhere around 70. Because there will be other projects, because there's just an enormous amount of material. So we'll leave that here. But so do you want to explain just where he goes after Mort goes off?
Well, it's so wild. Mort became a huge star in France. So their partnership sort of started to deteriorate, and my dad really loved Mort. And I think he was really crestfallen when Mort moved on, but it was totally understandable, and Mort became this giant star in France. As a matter of fact, I used to visit him, and he had a complete French accent. He didn't even sound like a guy from Brooklyn. When he picked me up at the train station, he'd be, baby, baby, and then we'd go to his suite or his house in Nice, and everybody was topless, and they put the little dog on the table, and the dog ate off of everyone's plate, and I would be calling my dad going, Mort doesn't even seem like Mort. He's with the French accent, whatever. So Mort went on to write Jacques Brel as well, Alive and Living in Paris, and if you still talk to people of a certain age that are French, they all know Mort Schumann. He was a big star. But my dad sort of fell into hard times in a way. He couldn't, the singer-songwriter, etc., started to pivot, and he wasn't making the kind of money that he had been making, so he decided to become a card player. So he supported our family as a professional poker player and holding games, running games, taking a piece of the pot, and that was a 10-year period of my life. And it wasn't like, friendly little card games. It was kind of like The Sopranos-ish. And, there was a guy with a gun at the door, and there was characters in the house, and it was a whole chapter. That's really amazing. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because as a teenager, I had a lot of freedom. He would say, okay, come back in the morning, because I was living with him at the time, and he'd be like, come back in the morning, I need the whole 24 hours for the game, so I could just do what I want, and then I would first set the game up. So I'd buy the stuff for the game, the bologna, the salami, the sandwiches, the cigarettes, the liquor, then I'd go to the Shylock, or the Shylock, to get some
Explain what that is.
the money lender for the cash for the game. It set that whole thing up. So that was, but then, a guy, his game got busted. A guy also ended up dead in the East River, and he realized, this is no way to continue life for a family. And at the same time, he was also always a little bit of songwriting, but Dr. John came into his life, and Willie DeVille and other co-writers, and he gave up the games after about 10 years. So that's, Dr. John is another chapter down the road.
Yes.
Back.
So there's probably room for us to color in some more doc stories, but
Oh yeah.
there's a million of them.
Well, I am just getting started. My dad was a character beyond, and I'm now not nervous anymore, so I can say whatever, but I would just say one thing with Toni talking about Al music. So what's his name? Don Kirshner came to my dad with a handful of songs that he had written and said, what do you think of these songs? And my father's like, you're not a songwriter. Try publishing. So Don, suppose as the story goes, became a publisher, formed with Al Nevins, and Neil Sedaka went to high school with Mort Schumann, and he had written a handful of songs, and my dad and Mort said, try Al's newly formed Al Don music, and that's how Neil, and you worked with Neil, but it was like, that was,
Alden was almost like an incestuous organization because everybody knew everybody or was related or went to school with everybody. It was magic.
my dad always said everybody was kind of helping each other. It wasn't a negative atmosphere. People were, I'll throw this line for you, and he helped Jerry and Mike helped him, and they were all kind of feeding each other ideas.
Another thing that's fun about the set is all the people that we found that were singing the
Dance of every song she wrote.
All right, I'll be getting to that in the future.
Ellie Greenwich.
Ellie was, I was good friends, and when Phil Spector was on trial, we used to go through the whole thing together on the phone because we knew Phil from a different way, like as you did. It was a different side of Phil. So my dad wrote a lot with Phil, and he lived I'm really rewinding, but he lived during the week at the Forest Hotel, which was opposite the side entrance to the Brill Building. So that was quite a world, and that was like people, a clown was murdered there from Billings Brothers. It was a really colorful place. At the same time, Duke Ellington hung out there, and John Carson, like he was somebody that you wanted to slip under the radar to see that hotel. Rodney Dangerfield lived there when he was, whatever. So there was it wasn't a fancy hotel. But that's where my dad preferred to be, and Damon Runyon Jr. lived in the penthouse. So it was those kind of characters. And that's what sparked my dad's interest, were those kind of characters.
So when
Knowles, and eventually, years later, we did a lot of stuff back from Terminations and a lot of stuff back in British reversionary territories. So it was a crash course. I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, and we ended up expanding the catalog and owning much, much more than we started out with. And many times what Doc would have, unfortunately, what he, got to take home, maybe much more than that. And so we went with that, and that's history. Stayed with BMI. I ran a separate independent publishing company of Doc's stuff for 25 years now. Now we were Spirit. Now with Reminisced by Warren Chappell. Mm-hmm. That's where we are now. Yeah.
And so you were able to get those rights back, and you've been turning them into things. The tribute record. And
I'm sorry. Yeah, we did a tribute record. Sharyn actually produced a tribute record which had Bob Dylan, the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, John Hyatt, Roseanne Cash. Oh my God, lots of people.
Yeah.
Solomon Burke, yeah. Dr. John, of course, B.B. King, and they all, and Irma Thomas, and they all did songs on that tribute album. It's called Till the Night Is Gone. It was on Rhino. It's hard to find now, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But and then eventually Sharyn did a documentary, which I highly recommend, which you mentioned at the beginning, called AKA Dr. Thomas. Streams on Amazon.
Right. So we're going to watch a little video from New York when we were transferring the acetates, because it helps explain sort of how this stuff gets transferred and restored and becomes a thing that you can buy. But when we come out of that video, I'd like to know why this project, why now? Because believe me, I was thrilled to get the phone call. It's what was the impetus for you to do this at this point? So let's watch.
I can't even believe
us
that
in New York.
These guys set up a studio in the hotel room on 57th Street. I mean, it's so insane, We were like, I reached out to a bunch of different labels, advised with my group of advisors, Peter being one, and just like everybody was, Omnivore came out as the top choice for how to handle these, what to do with all this stuff.
I'm totally grateful.
We have this archive, and I've been, my dad saved all these, a couple hundred demos, and there's more.
There's more.
But anyway, so when Cheryl jumped at it, and I was so thrilled because I knew that Omnivore would do the greatest job, I said, but I'm not shipping these acetates to California where they're based. So she said, we'll come to you, and we'll create this setup in the hotel room near your apartment, which was so crazy. I didn't even understand what you were going to do. That all four of you guys came and turned a hotel room into a restoration.
It was really fun walking past Carnegie Hall
Yeah, like
with
we
a
were-
hand truck and acetates.
We all carried stuff
Rubber
on
tubs.
hand trucks, acetates, a couple hundred down 57th Street into, what was your hotel?
Thompson or something.
Thompson Hotel, whatever. And then everything was set up and you had a cleaning station and you guys getting off that palmatic acid. It was wild.
So why did you want to do this now?
Well, the archive, which I've been working on for a couple of years, is hopefully about to land a home in a big institution, and then I won't have access to it. And I really wanted these things to get out in the world. So I knew that we needed to do this now.
I'm really glad you made them available for everybody to hear. Mike has one last bit on the restoration, and we're going to try to keep it high level.
Not too much in the weeds with audio nerd stuff, but we've been talking a lot about acetates here, and I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about what these actually are. They look like records, but as Cheryl is showing us here, they're basically round discs, usually aluminum, sometimes cardboard, sometimes glass, that are covered with a lacquer surface, which you can then take to a record cutting machine and have sound cut directly to it. The cool thing about this process is that, I should also say, they're called lacquers, they're called acetates, sometimes instantaneous recordings, instantaneous discs, dub plates. They have many different names, but they're all the same thing. The cool thing about these discs are that there's instant gratification. You can record sound to it and then hand it off to somebody to listen to, which is why they're so popular with the songwriters. The downside is that lacquer is not really as sturdy as you would like it to be, so it is delicate to play. And you may have heard that you can only get one or two plays out of an acetate before it's ruined. That's sort of exaggerating, but you do have to be aware that these things are very delicate and there's a shelf life to them. The other thing is that these are aluminum. Aluminum bends easily, and these can get bent. It doesn't take much to get it not flat anymore. And anybody who knows how to play a record player knows that we like flat discs with a needle to go over it. And when they're bent, they end up doing something like this, where it's just bouncing all over. It's like
That's one of the acetates we transferred.
the peel too. So what I have a little technique, and a lot of them are in this condition. I'm basically using my thumb as a shock absorber. You can't press too hard, you can't press too far down. I'm barely touching my thumb, but just the right amount of pressure, but also keeping in mind that that tone arm wants to move towards the center of the spindle, right? So you can't leave your thumb on there, you have to move it, and with just the right pressure as it goes along. So there's a process of getting some of these to actually play through. The other thing, as we saw in the video, was this substance called palmatic acid. And it's a natural process that happens with these lacquers. It's just
That's what
something
they were covered in that.
it looks like mold. I would think these are mold when they find these in a storage bin. But it's palmatic acid. It's a waxy substance. It doesn't come off with regular cleaning solutions. You have to have a special solution for it. And the good thing is we have it. And also they can, once they're cleaned, they look and sound great. So after these were cleaned, after Joy and Audrey cleaned these, I was playing them and I was really surprised that after 10 seconds, my needle was getting clogged up. It looked like this, and if you know what a needle looks like, it shouldn't look like that. It shouldn't have that fuzz all over the end of it. And that really degraded the sound. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. This is actually lacquer coming up off of the record. And again, this lacquer is not a durable material. And I said black lacquer across, it's not really, it's like a deep indigo purple. So when it comes up like this, it looks like blue. That little image on the right is like a brush I use to clean off my needle. So what I was finding was, I was getting about 10 seconds of audio before the sound was, top end was going down, or the treble was starting to go. It's not like you were putting a blanket over the speaker as it was recording. It would also get distorted. So I pick up the needle, brush it off, back up a few places, and get that passage again, until I ultimately got the entire song. And the waveform ends up looking like this. And that's a 5-minute recording of a 2-minute song. Anytime you see those big vertical lines, I'm going to play a sample of this. That's me scraping off the needle, just to get the the passage. And you can also see the waveform gets a little smaller. That's, the volume decreases too as that needle gets plugged up. Let's hear sort of cheap, but it's better to get a good sound. So once you get this big recording, then it's just a matter of, like I was saying in the video, stitching it all back together. And every time you see a horizontal line there, that's where the splice is. That's just the first part. I mean, at this point, I've got a song. Complete song. Now we have to do some of the digital restoration. And we use the regular tools you probably all heard about, declicks, decrackle, dehum, spectral denoise. The thing about these automatic restoration tools are they can be overused. They can, if you've ever heard about audio restoration, so a lot of people say audio restoration will suck the life out of a recording. Well, it absolutely can if you don't know what you're doing. There's a point where it starts taking out the good material and not separating it from the bad material. So like, think about a drum hit. It sounds like a tick. So if you hit these things too hard, it'll take that drum hit out, or part of the drum hit, and you end up with it. And it does, it completely sucks the life out of the recording. So you've got to use these sparingly. And that means that you're going to have some noise left over. And then you have to go in and do the real grunt work of actually physically or manually removing pops and ticks. And what you see here, I'm highlighting a tick and deleting it. This represents a few seconds of audio when I'm going in there and removing all of the ticks. It's time-consuming and painstaking work, but the results, you can end up making an acetate sound like it's coming off of a master tape. Now, the person that did all this work is this guy over here, Jordan McLeod.
Thank you, John.
We did all this thing. Jordan is a mastering and restoration engineer. He's a world-class restoration engineer. He works with me at Osiris Studio. And after we got back from our New York trip, I handed all these 160 plus songs to him and said, man, go to town. There's a lot of work here. So he stitched them all together, did all the restoration work, so then I could come around and do the mastering on it. And we end up with the final mastered version. This is also that the first recording, the pitch was wrong, so I had to pitch it down. But this is the final version. What else was there for me to do but cry? Oh, do you believe yesterday this girl was in my arms and swore to me that she'd be mine eternally, and the reason of his latest
It's a favorite of mine, and I had never heard the demo without this massive scratch. And when you fix that, and even my dad, when you fix it, and even my dad has written on there, do not play, all scratched. And I was like, oh my God, that was some miracle that you fixed it. It was a constant, we couldn't even play it. Yeah, so messed up.
So we have a couple of minutes, not long, but does anybody have any questions for any of our esteemed panelists?
This stuff is so amazing because, for instance, a song like Turn Me Loose, Mort really does an incredible job on the demo. And he even recorded it as a single himself, Turn Me Loose. But they pitched it to Elvis. Elvis didn't do it for whatever reason, and then they gave it to Fabian, watered it down, and it became a big hit for Fabian. And it's a little hard to listen to, actually. I think they actually did change some of the lyrics.
Yeah.
Fabian wasn't really, he hadn't lived a life, he was a kid. kid and he wasn't a great singer. Did you ever pitch anything to Fabian?
No.
No.
No, but I know a lot of The Office did. They pitched other songs too.
Yeah, Fabian recorded a lot of my father's songs. I'm a Man, Turn Me Loose, Hold That Tiger. I don't even remember. A bunch of things, but none of them, they were always like he was a child singing, and he wasn't really a singer.
He was dying to be a soul singer. Didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, he's really, the demos were always great.
That's something, you know, Cheryl and I worked on a lot of songwriting demos, and the Stax songwriting demos previous to this. And the thing about demos, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word demos, I want to hear the real song. But they are selling these songs, so they're, the production, the performances are all just so great.
Well, I find sometimes too, when the songwriter's singing it, it sometimes captures the essence of the song.
Always.
You know, that may get better in the studio and may totally fail in the studio, depending upon the artist and how it's handled. But you know, I think some of the demos that we've had the privilege of working with are just the version of the song, and there's so many songs that we never would have gotten to hear otherwise. And I wish, you know, I know we don't, it's 2025 and we don't live in this world, but I sure wish, you know, there'd be some current artists that might consider some of these songs or some of the Stax songs that we did that never got a cut, you know, because the songs are ridiculously great. Just amazing.
So many songs that nobody's ever heard.
Yeah.
So many.
So thank you. What's that? A question? Hello.
Did the demos have producers as well, or were they just basically the artists playing their versions of the songs?
Toni?
Demos were always made in a studio that the writers would book studio time, usually 2 hours to do a song. And as a writer, we would just produce our demos, you know, do our demos very simply and do it.
I was working on a project with some Burt Bacharach songs and Dionne Warwick, and I called Burt and I said, where's the demo of the song that you guys wrote for Dionne? He said, it's the released version, because it was a head arrangement we did in the studio, we liked it, came out on Scepter as a single, and you know. So I think it seems to me that in those days it was a pretty direct line.
Yeah, it was, and Dionne actually did a lot of demos. Yeah. Dionne and her sister,
Right.
Dee Dee Warwick.
Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just pursuing that point about songwriters, when exactly can you pinpoint the stage where singers felt that they had to write their own songs rather than record songs written by professional songwriters?
I think usually, you know, people point to Bob Dylan, people point to the Beatles. You know, when the songwriter and the artist sort of became the same person. Right? So I think Dylan and the Beatles probably.
There are great singer-songwriters, and they do their versions the best.
Yeah, and it changed publishing, it changed songwriting, and all that. But generally, I think those are the folks that sort of get pointed to. Is there another? No. Thanks for spending an hour with us talking about Doc Pomus.
Thank you.
Yeah.